If you see this echo image, on the right side whatever you can see is the mitral wall, on the left side you can see the tricuspid wall. If you compare the two walls, the wall on the right side is moving less as compared to the wall on the left side. This is because there is narrowing of the wall. This is called as mitral stenosis. So in this video we are going to study about mitral stenosis with particular emphasis on how to identify the murmur, how to identify heart sounds, etc. The term mitral stenosis means narrowing of the mitral orifice. So mitral stenosis means there is obstruction to the blood flow from the left atria to the left ventricle due to narrowing of the mitral wall. The normal mitral wall area is 4 to 6 centimeters square is the normal mitral wall area. If it is less than 2 centimeters square, there is obstruction to the blood flow from the left atrium to the left ventricle. Normally the mean LA pressure is 2 to 12 millimeters of Hg, and the LV and diastolic pressure is 5 to 12 millimeters of Hg. So normally there is no pressure gradient between the LA and the LV. So if we consider this 4 chambers of the heart, this is RA, RV, LA, LV. So the wall which is present here is the bicuspid or the mitral wall. So whenever there is narrowing of the mitral wall, the blood flow from the LA to LV is obstructed. As a result, the LA pressure rises. So there is rise in the LA pressure, which is the first step in mitral stenosis. And once the LA pressure rises, the pressure is transmitted back to the pulmonary veins, which drain into the LA. So once the pulmonary venous pressure increases, it causes pulmonary venous hypertension. Now this pulmonary venous hypertension, what it does is that when the pressure in the LA is less than 25 millimeters of Hg, the the pulmonary venous hypertension produces alveolar interstitial edema. The alveolar interstitial edema results in fibrosis and thickening of the interstitium. The fibrosis and thickening of the interstitium ultimately results in hypoxia. Hypoxia induces chemoreceptor stimulation. The chemoreceptor stimulation causes vasoconstriction resulting in pulmonary arterial hypertension. So the primary step in mitral stenosis is narrowing of the mitral orifice, which results in elevated LA pressure, which causes rise in the pressure in the pulmonary veins, which results in pulmonary venous hypertension. When the pressure in the LA is less than 25 millimeters of Hg, it causes alveolar interstitial edema, which results in fibrosis and thickening of the alveolar interstitium, ultimately resulting in hypoxia. Hypoxia induces stimulation of the chemoreceptor, which leads to reflex pulmonary arterial vasoconstriction, resulting in pulmonary arterial hypertension. So this is the basic pathophysiology. Now if the pressure in the LA rises suddenly about 25 millimeters of Hg, this results in acute pulmonary edema without left ventricular failure. So any condition which increases LA pressure. So LA pressure can be increased when the diastole is shortened, such as in tachycardia or in exercise. So whenever there is tachycardia maybe due to exercise or anemia or fever, so what it does is that the diastole is shortened more as compared to the systole. Systole is generally not shortened, but the diastole is shortened. When the diastole is shortened, the blood flow from the LA to the LV, the duration of the blood flow reduces. As a result, the pressure in the LA increases. Whenever the pressure in the LA increases, it is back transmitted. If the pressure in the LA increases about 25 millimeters of Hg, it can cause acute pulmonary edema without left ventricular failure. So now, based on what are the causes of Mitral stenosis. Causes of mitral stenosis is the most important cause is rheumatic heart disease. Rheumatic heart disease, in rheumatic heart disease, 70% of the patients of rheumatic heart disease will have mitral valve involvement, followed by combined mitral as well as aortic valve involvement is seen in 25% of the cases, and isolated aortic valve involvement in about 5% of the cases. So the most common cause of MS is rheumatic heart disease. The other causes of MS are congenital MS, or maybe due to calcification that is seen in old age, or connective tissue disorders such as SLE, RA, or atrial myxoma, and rarely infective endocarditis can cause MS. It is the rarest cause. Earlier the MS was divided into mild, moderate, severe and critical MS, but the newer Harrison classifies MS into, if it is less than 1.5 centimeter square, if the mitral wall area is less than 1.5 centimeter square, it is called as severe MS. If it is less than 1 centimeter square, it is called as very severe MS. If the wall area is less than 2 centimeter square, it is called as significant MS. So these are the basic pathophysiology as well as causes of mitral stenosis. Now let us come to clinical presentation. The clinical presentation, the symptoms of MS in the West, MS is seen in third or fourth decade of life, but in India or Southeast Asian countries, it is seen in the second decade of the life. Okay. There is something called a juvenile MS that is seen in teenagers, where the MS presents with acute atrial fibrillation. The most common symptom is exertional dyspnea. Now why there is dyspnea in this patient is because of pulmonary venous hypertension. The LA pressure which is transmitted back to the pulmonary veins ultimately causes alveolar edema, alveolar interstitial edema, which results in hypoxia, which induces dyspnea. Other causes may be PND. Other symptoms are PND, orthopnea. These are also related to pulmonary venous hypertension. Now other symptoms may be related to right ventricular failure. These are right hypochondriac pain. Hypochondriac pain is due to distension of the Gleason's capsule of the liver due to venous congestion of the liver, and pedal edema. Rarely the patient can present with hemoptysis. The causes of hemoptysis in MS, the most common cause is pulmonary apoplexy, that is rupture of the bronchial vessels. Other causes may be pulmonary edema or pulmonary infarction, Winter's bronchitis, or even pulmonary hemosiderosis. Apart from this, the other clinical features may be symptoms may be palpitations. Now palpitations generally are a symptom of volume overload of ventricle. However, in MS you get palpitations due to arrhythmia, that is atrial fibrillation. Rarely there may be change in the voice. This is that is hoarseness in the voice. This is due to compression of the left recurrent laryngeal nerve by enlarged left atrium. So the syndrome which is caused due to this is called as Ortner syndrome. One thing we need to remember is that if the question is that which is the first chamber to fail in MS, it is left atrium. If they ask you first ventricle to fail, then it is right ventricle. So right ventricle failure is the first ventricle to fail, and the first chamber to fail is LA. The total pathogenesis can be represented as increased LA pressure causes pulmonary venous hypertension, which causes alveolar interstitial edema, which results in hypoxia, which causes pulmonary arterial hypertension due to vasoconstriction. This results in right ventricular hypertrophy and right ventricular failure ultimately. So this is the complete pathogenesis in MS. So these are the symptoms related to MS. Now coming to signs, on general physical examination, on head to toe examination, you will find something called as mitral phasis. Mitral phasis is nothing but purple pinkish patches on cheeks. These are due to decreased cardiac output and peripheral vasoconstriction. There may be malnutrition. On pulse, if the patient is in sinus rhythm, the pulse is normal. If the patient has AF, then there is irregular rhythm with pulse deficit. Now pulse deficit is generally more than 10. Blood pressure is usually normal. If AF is present, then 3 values are taken, an average of 3. Apart from that, if there is right ventricular failure, then there is pedal edema and right hypochondriac tenderness. And in JVP, changes in JVP are JVP is elevated because of right ventricular failure. Other thing is that if there is associated TR, then you can see CV wave on JVP. Now appreciating CV wave is quite difficult. Only thing that is specific maybe that is elevated JVP. Now on CVS examination, on inspection, generally the precordium is normal on inspection. On palpation, so palpation, the first thing we examine is the apical impulse. Now apical impulse, there are important thing which you need to remember in MS is that site of apical impulse and the character of apical impulse. The site is normal, that is 5th intercostal space, just medial to mid clavicular line on the left side. So the character of apical impulse, normally the apical impulse has a upward thrusting, that is, or the lifting movement of the finger, which is less than 50% of the systole. So in MS, the first heart sound, that is S1, can be palpated, that is palpable S1 is seen in MS. This is called as tapping apical impulse. That is, the impulse just touches your finger and goes. It is tapping apical impulse. Apart from this, at the apex you can palpate is the thrill. Thrill is generally diastolic. You can time the thrill by palpating the carotid impulse. If the thrill is coming along with the carotid pulse, it is systolic. If it is coming after the carotid pulse, it is diastolic thrill. So you can palpate diastolic thrill at the apex. So generally whenever there is palpation of the apex, you have to position the patient in left lateral. So left lateral position is very important to appreciate all these details. Apart from this, due to pulmonary arterial hypertension, you can feel two things. That is, one is diastolic shock. Diastolic shock is nothing but palpable P2. Apart from that is parasternal heave. Left parasternal heave is another feature. It is due to right ventricular pressure overload. So these are the two things. Apart from that, on percussion, only thing which you can find on percussion is that in the left second intercostal space, there may be impaired note on percussion. This is due to, again, pulmonary arterial hypertension. Now coming to auscultation. So whenever you auscultate a patient, you follow something called as inching method of Levine. For that, you have to start from the apex and auscultate every inch of the heart. From apex, you have to come to tricuspid. From tricuspid, go to pulmonary area to aortic area. After aortic area, you come back to neo-aortic area. So the areas to be auscultated is, first thing is mitral area, that is in the 5th intercostal space, just medial to the mid-clavicular line on the left side. Okay, and then the tricuspid area, that is 4th or 5th intercostal space, left parasternal. Then pulmonary area, left second intercostal space, again parasternal. Then aortic area is the right second intercostal space, parasternal. And neo-aortic area or the orbs area is left third intercostal space. Okay, so these are the areas to be auscultated. So now when you auscultate any area, at that area you need to first identify the heart sounds, then any abnormal additional sounds if present, and murmurs. So three things, it is heart sounds, added sounds, and murmur. So now heart sounds at mitral and tricuspid area, first heart sound is, you have to describe in detail about the first heart sound, and second heart sound is usually heard in that. At aortic and pulmonary area you have to describe the S2 and S1 is generally heard there, but you have to describe more about S2 in aortic and pulmonary area. Added sound may be opening snap or ejection clicks, and murmurs are systolic or diastolic murmur. So now one thing you need to remember is that for any heart sound to become loud or soft, there are four things which are important. First thing is structural integrity of the wall. Structural integrity means that if there is inadequate closure, then the heart sound is soft, or if the wall is calcified, then the heart sound is soft. So only if the wall is thickened and is pliable, the heart sound can be loud. That is, wall is thickened and pliable, then heart sound is loud. If the wall is calcified or there is inadequate closure, there is soft heart sound. Second important thing is the velocity of closure. So velocity of closure of the wall will depend upon the PR interval. If PR interval is short, then the velocity of closure is fast. As a result, there is loud sound. If PR interval is prolonged, then the heart sound is soft because the velocity reduces. Next thing is the status of the ventricular contraction. So if the contractility increases, such as in tachycardias or in anemias, the heart sound becomes loud. If contractility decreases, such as in acute myocardial infarction, the heart sound becomes soft. Apart from this, important thing is heart rate. If the heart rate is high, that is in tachycardia, the heart sounds becomes loud because the velocity of closure increases, and in brady it is soft. Apart from this, another important thing you need to remember is that if this is the native position of the wall, and if the wall opens till this distance, the distance traveled by this wall to close, and if you compare this with another wall, this distance is greater than the distance traveled. So this wall closure will produce loud sound compared to this. This will produce a softer sound compared to this. Compared to this wall will produce a softer sound. So the distance traveled by the wall, if it is longer, then the sound produced is loud. So now let us see what happens in mitral stenosis. In mitral stenosis, the basic thing is that the wall is narrowed. Okay, this is the LA, this is LV. Okay, wall is narrowed, but because the LA pressure is elevated, what happens is that at the end of the diastole, the LA pushes the wall far apart. So at the end of the diastole, the position is that they are widely open. The wall is widely open at the end of diastole. So when the LV systole starts, the wall travels a longer distance compared to normal. So when the wall travels a longer distance compared to the normal, the wall is shut loudly. So you get a loud first heart sound in mitral stenosis. Loud first heart sound in mitral stenosis is because of diastolic gradient between the LA and LV. As a result, the wall is kept wide open at the end of diastole. When the LV pressure rises due to LV systole, the wall is closed and the distance traveled is larger and the wall is closed suddenly, resulting in loud first heart sound. Normally the first S1 is due to closure of the mitral wall and the tricuspid wall. Now the closure of mitral wall and tricuspid wall, the difference between them is less than 20 milliseconds. Whenever the difference between the two sound is less than 20 milliseconds, our ears cannot perceive it as two separate sound. As a result, when S1 is heard as a single sound. However, S2, which is due to closure of aortic and pulmonary wall, the difference between the two is more than 20 milliseconds. So we hear them as two separate sound, that is A2 and P2, which is represented here. And the difference between the closure of aortic and pulmonary wall also increases when we inspire, because when we inspire, the blood to the right side of the heart increases. As a result, the pulmonary wall closure is delayed. As a result, normally we can hear a inspiratory splitting of the second heart sound, which is normal. Okay, so if you see the phonocardiogram of mitral stenosis, you can see that S1, here is the S2, here is the S1. S1 is loud, represented by a thick line, and S2 is soft or normal, which is represented by two separate lines, that is due to A2 and P2. After that, there is a louder sound, that is opening snap. Opening snap, whenever this wall opens, because it is thickened, it produces few vibration which are perceived as opening snap. Now opening snap occurs in the diastole, that is immediately after the second heart sound. So opening snap needs to be differentiated from split S2. Now how do you differentiate opening snap from split S2 is that if you see the representation here, the P2, which is the second part of the split second heart sound, that is there are two parts, A2 and P2. The second part of the split is P2. P2, if you compare with the opening snap has a higher frequency and is louder. Opening snap is higher frequency and is louder as compared to P2. Also, split can be heard at aortic or pulmonary area. However, opening snap is heard anywhere between the left parasternal area to the in the fifth intercostal space to the apical impulse, generally heard just medial to the apical impulse. So these are the two differences. Now how do you know that the S1 is loud? S1 is loud is that one thing is that you can compare it with your own heartbeat, that is auscultate yourself, then auscultate the patient. That is the one way you can do. Other thing is that how to know it is S1 is that you palpate the patient's carotid impulse and auscultate simultaneously. The sound which comes along with the carotid pulse is the first heart sound, and the sound after that, which is relatively softer, is the second heart sound. Now in mitral stenosis, there is a murmur called as mid diastolic murmur. So the murmur which occurs immediately after the carotid pulse, if you are auscultating, a sound comes after carotid along with carotid pulse is the first heart sound. If the murmur starts after that, it is systolic murmur. If the murmur starts after the second sound, that is after the S2, is the diastolic murmur. In mitral stenosis, after the opening snap, there is blood flow across a narrowed wall which produces a murmur, that is mid diastolic murmur. That is after the opening of the wall. So the this period, that is isovolumetric relaxation period, there is no murmur. Immediately after the wall opening, there is murmur. The murmur initially increases, reduces, and just before the next cycle, there is pre-systolic accentuation, that is increase in the intensity of the murmur just before the first heart sound. So now let us listen to how this murmur is actually. So if you hear this sound, you can see that there is one loud sound. That loud sound is S1. So just before the loud heart sound, you can hear some rumbling sound, that is the pre-systolic accentuation of the murmur. So after that first heart sound, there is a gap, then you can hear two sounds. That second the two sounds are, one is second heart sound followed by a louder sound, that is the opening snap. After opening snap, you can hear a faint murmur which gradually increases in intensity just before the louder sound again. So the thing is that there is pre-systolic murmur followed by a loud sound, followed by S2, which is relatively softer compared to this sound. After that, a louder sound, that is opening snap, followed by a murmur. The murmur increases in intensity. Then again you can hear the loud sound, that is the first heart sound. Now let us reduce the speed of the murmur and hear it again. Okay, so here you can clearly identify that the pre-systolic accentuation is very loud, followed by a loud first heart sound, followed by a gap. Then you can hear the second heart sound, then opening snap, and then the murmur. Now let us listen to another audio of murmur. In here you can see that there is a loud first heart sound, followed by a gap, followed by a second heart sound. Then there is only pre-systolic murmur, followed by again the loud heart sound. So this is the murmur. If you keep on auscultating, you can actually find it. The murmur is described here as a rough rumbling low pitched murmur, which is best heard with bell of the stethoscope with patient in left lateral position. The murmur is best heard in expiration. MDM is accentuated by exercise, coughing, squatting, amyl nitrate inhalation, and the murmur is decreased by strain phase of Valsalva maneuver. The pre-systolic accentuation of the murmur which is there may be lost if the patient develops atrial fibrillation. However, there is one hypothesis called as Kreil's hypothesis, which states that the pre-systolic accentuation can occur in atrial fibrillation during the beat with short cycle length. There are two factors which can identify severity of MS. Longer the duration, more severe. Long murmur means severe MS. Another thing is S2 opening snap gap. So this is very difficult to identify clinically, but can be identified by phonocardiogram. Shorter the gap between S2 and opening snap, more severe is the disease. Now coming to investigations on ECG, what you can find is that there is signs of LA enlargement. Sign of LA enlargement on ECG is that if you see V1, in V1 normally you can get just a small positive deflection. However, in MS, due to left atrial enlargement, you can get small positive followed by a big negative deflection. If the width of the negative deflection is more than 0.04 second, it is called it is a sign of LA enlargement. This is Morris index. Other features that can be seen are due to pulmonary arterial hypertension with RVH. So sign of RVH is R by S ratio in V1 greater than 1. Along with this, there can be right bundle branch pattern with RV strain. RV strain is T inversion in V1 to V3. On echo, you can find that mitral wall area is reduced, mitral wall thickening is present with calcification if present. Along with this, you can see that pulmonary arterial pressures are elevated. Okay, so apart from this, there is something called as echo score, which is important on echo. Echo score, what they do is that they take into consideration 4 things. So first thing is that degree of leaflet thickening, then is calcification, then is mobility of the wall, and the fourth important thing is subvalvular thickening. These things are important to decide about surgery, which we will discuss during the treatment. Next, on chest X-ray, because left atrial enlargement is present with enlargement of the left atrial appendage, the left border, which is usually not straight, becomes straight that is a sign of straightening of the left border of the heart is a sign of MS. Apart from that, on the right border you can see that there is double contour of the right border. This is due to enlarged LA. This is also another sign of MS. Apart from this, there are signs of pulmonary venous hypertension. So when pulmonary venous hypertension is grade 1, you can see that here there is prominence of the upper lobe veins. That is a sign of pulmonary venous hypertension. Grade 2 is Curly's lines. So here you can see that is Curly's B line. Curly's A line will be somewhere here, which is not there in this X-ray. Then grade 3 is bat wing appearance, that is frank pulmonary edema. Another feature of pulmonary arterial hypertension is that dilated pulmonary artery can be seen from the hilum. When the length is more than 17 in male and 16 in male, it is a sign of pulmonary arterial hypertension. Generally, there is no cardiomegaly as such on mitral X-ray of mitral stenosis. Now coming to treatment could be medical treatment or surgical treatment. Now apart from treating the symptomatic treatment for MS, we need to treat for rheumatic heart disease. So rheumatic heart disease may be treated by using penicillin prophylaxis for all rheumatic MS patient at least up to age of 40. Or a newer drug which is used for prophylaxis is the azithromycin, that is in ARMOR study, for which we use it for 1 year after once the patient is diagnosed with rheumatic MS. Apart from this, the LA pressure which is elevated, that can be reduced by using diuretics or improving cardiac output by increasing the diastole. This can be done by beta blockers. So cardioselective beta blockers can be used even in absence of AF. If AF is present, then either beta blockers or digoxin can be used. And all patients with valvular atrial fibrillation needs oral anticoagulation with vitamin K antagonist. So vitamin K antagonists are warfarin or acetrum. So that earlier the thing was that if the LA was dilated more than 5.5 centimeter, even in absence of atrial fibrillation, anticoagulation was indicated. However, the current practice is that only if there is atrial fibrillation, then oral anticoagulation is indicated, and oral anticoagulation with newer anticoagulants is not tested for valvular AF. So for valvular AF, only vitamin K antagonists are used. Now coming to surgical treatment. Now surgical treatment could be balloon mitral valvotomy or mitral valve replacement. Now balloon mitral valvotomy is indicated when the patient is symptomatic with NYHA 2, 3 or 4 with moderate MS, moderate to severe MS, or if the patient is asymptomatic with severe MS with PAH more than 50, pulmonary arterial pressure more than 50 millimeters of Hg. Apart from this, another indication is that pregnant patient who becomes symptomatic with moderate MS. Pregnant symptomatic patient, then balloon mitral valvotomy is indicated. So generally the mitral stenosis recurs after about 3 to 4 years of balloon mitral valvotomy. This patient require procedures like repeat balloon mitral valvotomy or sometimes closed mitral valvotomy or maybe mitral valve replacement. Now balloon mitral valvotomy is contraindicated if the echo score is high, that is if there is presence of calcification of the wall or if there is subvalvular thickening. The balloon mitral valvotomy is contraindicated. In such cases, mitral valve replacement is indicated. So indication for mitral valve replacement is symptomatic patient with NYHA 3 or 4 with moderate MS with contraindication for BMV, or if the patient is symptomatic even with NYHA 1 or 2 with severe MS, or if the patient is undergoing other surgery such as CABG, if the patient is undergoing, along with that if the patient has MS, then replacement of the mitral valve is done. So with this, mitral stenosis along with all the details of the murmurs are done. If you like my channel, kindly subscribe to the channel. Thank you.